Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into the absolute wild 150-year evolution of Eli Lilly. We're going to chart their path from a tiny 19th century pharmacy all the way to a global medical titan. We'll explore how a company, founded by a single Civil War veteran, grew to fundamentally change the course of human health, not just once, but multiple times across entirely different centuries.
Okay, just take a second to process this number. In November 2025, Eli Lilly achieved a truly monumental milestone. They became the world's first healthcare company to reach a $1 trillion market capitalization. It's staggering, right? It places them among the absolute titans of global industry, and it marks a totally historic moment in the pharmaceutical world. But how exactly did a single drug manufacturer reach this unprecedented valuation?
Well, to understand that valuation, we really just have to look at where their money is coming from today. And what's wild is how much of it is driven by a single revolutionary treatment. Their GLP-1 drug, tirzepatide, which you probably know commercially as Mounjaro or Zepbound, accounts for a massive 56% of their total revenue. So while they do have a really diverse portfolio with cancer treatments like abemaciclib and various autoimmune therapies, it's pretty clear that their recent breakthrough in treating type 2 diabetes and obesity is the primary engine fueling that trillion-dollar status.
Section 1. Civil War to Pharmacy. To truly grasp the sheer scale of this modern empire, we actually need to flash back to 1876 and look at the incredibly humble beginnings of a Civil War veteran and pharmaceutical chemist named Colonel Eli Lilly.
Things moved really fast for them right from the start. Colonel Lilly opened his shop in Indianapolis with literally 3 employees, and one of them was his son Josiah. In that first year, they made just $4,470 in sales, but they were incredibly aggressive about embracing scientific research and cutting-edge management. By 1886, they had already hired their first full-time scientist, a chemist named Ernest G. Eberhard. And as we roll into the 1920s, under the leadership of the founder's grandson, they were pioneering massive, highly efficient straight-line production facilities.
Now you have to remember, back then, the pharmaceutical trade was kind of the Wild West. It was notorious for unregulated snake oil, outlandish claims, and really inconsistent dosing. So Lilly introduced a simple but absolutely brilliant innovation in 1909, blueprinting manufacturing tickets. By creating exact, standardized copies of drug formulas, it helped completely eliminate dangerous manufacturing and transcription errors. It was a major operational reform that set an entirely new standard for how medicinal drugs were made. Because of these innovations, they were able to completely transform their physical manufacturing capabilities. They moved totally away from the old 19th century practice of hand-mixing extracts from plant materials and instead implemented straight-line production. This is where raw materials go in one end and finished products come out the other. By building this highly automated system, they were recognized by 1917 as the largest capsule factory in the world. We're talking an output of 2.5 million capsules every single day. Section 2. The Insulin Revolution. This immense manufacturing capability, paired with their growing focus on scientific rigor, directly set the stage for one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the entire 20th century. And it all stems from a dramatic and world-changing collaboration. In the early 1920s, scientists at the University of Toronto, including Frederick Banting and John MacLeod, were developing insulin. Now, they were initially super hesitant to work with a commercial drug firm, but they quickly realized their academic labs just simply couldn't scale production to meet the desperate need out there. So Lilly's director of biochemical research, George Close, successfully negotiated a partnership. Fast forward to 1923, and Lilly was mass-producing the very first commercially available insulin called Iletin for the world. And that happened to be the exact same year those academic researchers won the Nobel Prize.
As you can probably guess, the success of insulin was completely transformative. It essentially ended Lilly's days as just a regional pill maker. For almost 2 years, they held an effective monopoly on the sale of insulin in the United States. And this financial and reputational windfall was huge. It allowed them to attract top scientific talent to their labs, perfectly paving the way for their future medical breakthroughs.
Section 3. Global Growth and Vaccines. As we move into the mid-20th century, we see the companies scaling their operations even further to meet some massive, unprecedented global crises. When World War II broke out, the sheer array of products they manufactured for the war effort was just astounding. They partnered with the American Red Cross and ended up processing 20% of the United States' total blood plasma. That's over 2 million pints. On top of that, they were mass-producing the newly discovered antibiotic, penicillin, the standard-issue merthiolate antiseptic used by the Army, vaccines for things like encephalitis and typhus, and even the seasickness medications that soldiers used during the D-Day invasion.
All of this expertise in government collaboration and large-scale, high-stakes manufacturing made them the absolute perfect partner a decade later. In 1955, when Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine, Lilly was selected by the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis to help produce it. In fact, Lilly manufactured an incredible 60% of Salk's polio vaccine, permanently solidifying their role as a true pillar of global public health.
Section 4. The blockbuster drug era. Building on those decades of complex manufacturing and research, the late 20th century marked the company's entry into a highly lucrative yet intensely competitive era: blockbuster psychiatric medications. During this time, we start seeing the rollout of medications that completely defined their respective eras. In 1986, they introduced Prozac, which broke major ground as one of the very first therapies of its class to block serotonin uptake in the human brain. They followed up that massive success with Zyprexa in 1996 for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and then Cymbalta in 2004 for depression and anxiety. These eventually became some of the most financially successful pharmaceuticals in industry history.
However, it's important to impartially note that this era also brought some intense legal and regulatory scrutiny. In January 2009, the company faced significant legal action regarding how they were promoting Zyprexa. This ultimately resulted in a $1.415 billion penalty for the illegal marketing of the atypical antipsychotic medication. At the time, that stood as the largest criminal fine in U.S. history.
Section 5. The modern GLP-1 boom. Moving right into the 21st century, the company had to navigate patent expirations on those big blockbuster psychiatric drugs, and they executed a massive pivot. A pivot that would eventually catapult them to that staggering trillion-dollar valuation we talked about earlier.
Their pioneering work in GLP-1 receptor agonists definitely wasn't an overnight success. It actually started back in 2005 with the approval of exenatide. This was the very first GLP-1, and surprisingly, it was based on a novel substance isolated from the venom of the Gila monster. Talk about wild science, right? From that early biological discovery, they spent nearly 2 decades refining the science, eventually evolving it into the dual GIP and GLP-1 receptor agonist formulations we see today, getting Mounjaro approved in 2022 and Zepbound for obesity in 2023.
Now, alongside this massive modern boom in weight loss and diabetes drugs, the company also had to adapt to modern healthcare pricing demands. Interestingly, this involved the exact same drug that built their empire a century ago, insulin. Aligning with the Inflation Reduction Act, Lilly announced a program in 2023 to cap the out-of-pocket monthly cost of insulin at just $35. It ensures broader access to this critical legacy medication and creates this really striking symmetry, right? Their foundational drug becomes more accessible, while their newer innovations drive totally unprecedented revenue.
So what are they doing with all that GLP-1 money? Well, they're aggressively leveraging it to buy the future. Just looking at the scale of their recent acquisitions tells the whole story. They're using their capital to acquire highly specialized biotech firms, like the $8 billion purchase of Loxo Oncology to expand their cancer treatments, or Dermiera for immunology, and Point Biopharma. They are actively constructing their pipeline for the next several decades.
Which really leaves us with one final thought to wrap up this explainer. Given their incredible trajectory, from Colonel Lilly's 3-person shop hand-mixing plant extracts to literally saving lives in World War II, to now becoming a trillion-dollar biotech powerhouse driven by GLP-1s, what exactly will the next century of their pharmaceutical innovation look like? What unimaginable medical breakthroughs are currently being researched in their labs today that are going to completely change our lives tomorrow?